All right, let's start. Number 12, false stairs. In 1995, a survey team working inside a newly opened shaft tomb at the Saqqara necropolis placed a foot on what appeared to be solid, dressed limestone. The step held for a fraction of a second. Then it gave way completely, and the floor below it was not where anyone expected it to be. Archaeology trains you to look for things that are out of place. It does not always train you to look for things that are deliberately, ingeniously placed to appear perfectly normal. The ancient Egyptian builders of the New Kingdom and Middle Kingdom periods understood this gap in human attention, and they exploited it with calculated precision. False architectural features, staircases that descend nowhere, steps that are balanced over voids rather than set on solid ground, appear across multiple sites in the Saqqara and Dashur complexes, engineered from the same dressed limestone as everything around them. The mechanism is straightforward and merciless. A slab of stone, shaped and finished to match the surrounding architecture, is laid across an open shaft rather than set into the ground. It looks identical to every other step above it. The drop below can range from 6 to 12 meters into shafts packed with debris, broken ceramics, or in some documented cases, secondary arrangements waiting at the bottom. The builders did not need complexity. Gravity was the trap. What makes this particularly unsettling is its distribution. False stair features have been documented not just at Saqqara, but at tombs near Dashur and Abu Sir, indicating that this was not one architect's idea, but a standard practice, a technique refined and repeated across generations of tomb construction, spanning more than 1,000 years. How many unexcavated shafts beneath the Egyptian desert still have that final step intact, waiting for the first person to trust it? Number 11, collapsing bridge pit. During the extended clearance of the Valley of the Kings, following Howard Carter's discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, workers moving through adjacent unregistered passages fell through surfaces that had appeared under torchlight and decades of settled debris to be solid, packed earth. Beneath them were pits. The falls were not always survivable. The concealed bridge pit works through patience. A thin surface, stone, timber, or compressed rubble spans an open void. In freshly built tombs, it might have been strong enough to fool only the most careless intruder. But over centuries, accumulated sand and dust settle on top of the spanning material, burying it completely, erasing every visual clue that the ground is not what it appears to be. By the time a modern archaeologist walks across it, the trap has had 3,000 years to disguise itself. Similar concealed pit features have been documented at Mayan sites in Belize and Guatemala, including the complexes at Caracol and Lamanai, as well as in Chinese Han Dynasty tomb construction at Mawangdui, where pits in outer corridors were covered with materials designed to bear light inspection but not sustained weight. The pattern cuts across cultures and centuries. Builders and civilizations that never contacted each other arrived at the same lethal solution independently. Modern ground-penetrating radar has identified previously undetected voids beneath active excavation sites at multiple locations in the Valley of the Kings, in Belize, and in central China. Engineers who have studied these sites note that the spanning materials in many identified pits are in advanced stages of structural deterioration. The builders of these tombs understood that time itself would do the finishing work, burying the danger until it was completely invisible. Number 10, swinging axe. In 2001, a team conducting laser mapping of a previously inaccessible passage in a late-period tomb at Abydos disturbed a lintel stone they had cataloged as structural. Field records from the mission describe what swung down from the recess above the doorframe as having been suspended there for approximately 2,400 years. The passage was narrow. There was very little room to move. The pendulum blade trap appears in the engineering vocabulary of several ancient civilizations, and it is described with unusual specificity in one of history's most important documents. The Shiji, or Records of the Grand Historian, written by Sima Qian around 94 BCE, explicitly states that the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, was fitted with mechanical crossbow and blade traps designed to fire or swing automatically at anyone who disturbed the interior. This is not folklore. This is a primary historical source, recorded 2 centuries after the tomb was sealed. What makes the swinging axe particularly inescapable is its geometry. The blade, mounted on a counterweighted arm inside a wall recess or ceiling housing, does not require a precise footstep on a marked plate. In documented configurations, the trigger is a cord or balance stone connected to a door, a lintel, or a threshold. Walking through the doorway is enough. The weapon's arc is calculated to cross the full width of the passage at mid-body height. Bronze components recovered from several Mediterranean Iron Age tomb complexes have demonstrated that spring-loaded and counterweighted mechanisms retain measurable tension even after centuries in sealed environments. The metal does not forget what it was told to do. What exactly does it mean when an archaeologist's field report describes a mechanism as still functional after 2 millennia? Number 9. Spear floor. In March 1974, farmers drilling a well near Xi'an in Shanxi province broke through into a void and found themselves looking at the faces of soldiers who had been standing guard for over 2,000 years. When archaeologists began working the outer perimeter of Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum complex shortly afterward, they found passageways in which the iron remnants of weapons-grade fittings were still present in the floor channels, angled upward, positioned precisely at the points where a person walking down the corridor would have to step. The Shiji's account of this tomb is not vague. Sima Qian writes that the interior was fitted with automatic crossbows set to fire at intruders. Weapons-grade iron was abundant in Qin dynasty construction, and the engineering sophistication of the mausoleum complex, covering approximately 98 square kilometers, reflects a state that understood how to solve difficult mechanical problems at scale. The spear floor is one of the simpler solutions. A sharpened iron or bronze point, mounted in an angled stone channel beneath a pressure-sensitive tile, drives upward through the foot and lower leg when weight is applied. It does not kill instantly. It immobilizes. That, researchers have concluded, was the intention. A person impaled through the foot cannot run. They cannot retreat. They are left in the dark, in a sealed passage, unable to reach the entrance, far from any help. The trap's cruelty is architectural. It turns the tomb itself into the killing instrument, and time finishes the work. The mausoleum of China's first emperor remains sealed to this day. Whatever is inside it, something is still guarding it. Number 8. Spike Pit. In 1987, a team from the French Archaeological Mission in Egypt, working at the Dashur necropolis, attempted to descend by rope into a shaft tomb that had never been fully recorded. The first person to reach the bottom found the stakes with their feet rather than their hands. The mission's field records note the injuries as severe. They note the darkness as total. Spike pits appear in the archaeological record of cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. The Aztec Codex Mendoza, compiled around 1541, describes pit arrangements around temple treasure rooms in the structures that preceded the construction of Tenochtitlan. Cambodian temple complexes from the Angkor period, documented by French scholars of the École Française d'Extrême-Orient, show evidence of pit features in outer corridors. Egyptian examples from Old Kingdom construction onward are among the most consistently documented defensive features in the ancient world. What gives the spike pit its particular longevity as a threat is something few people consider when they think about ancient wooden implements. In the anaerobic environment of a sealed tomb, a chamber starved of oxygen and moisture, organic materials do not rot on any human timescale. Wooden structural elements recovered from Old Kingdom Egyptian tombs have been found intact after more than 4,000 years. The stake that was sharpened and angled before the tomb was sealed may be as structurally sound today as the morning it was set. Concealed pit features remain among the most common causes of serious injury in active excavation contexts across Egypt and Central America. The relevant question is not whether they were ever dangerous. It is whether they have stopped being dangerous now. Number 7. Hidden blades. In 1956, an Egyptian workman assisting the Italian archaeological mission at Saqqara reached into a recess in a tomb wall to clear what appeared to be compacted debris from a shelf niche. The recess was not a shelf. The Italian mission's field notes, held at the Italian Institute of Oriental Studies, record the incident and its consequence. 3 fingers. Gone before he understood what had happened. The concealed blade trap is the most intimate of ancient killing mechanisms. It does not require you to walk onto a plate, step into a void, or move through a doorway. It requires only that you see something that looks interesting and reach toward it. The entire trap is built around the assumption that a curious person, moving through a tomb, will eventually reach for something. Bronze or iron blades, mounted on spring-tensioned or counterweighted arms inside wall niches and doorframe recesses, have been recovered from multiple sites across the Mediterranean world, including Etruscan tomb complexes in Tarquinia, where German archaeologist Wolfgang Helbig's 19th century surveys of Central Italian tomb architecture documented concealed mechanical features with consistent detail. What is remarkable about bronze spring mechanisms in sealed environments is their longevity. Laboratory analysis of bronze components from several Iron Age Mediterranean contexts has confirmed measurable residual tension after centuries underground. The ancient builders understood this. They were not building traps for the tomb's first decades. They were building them for the first person to reach in, whenever that person arrived. Medieval Arabic accounts of Egyptian tomb architecture reference concealed mechanical devices in tomb walls, written by scholars who had heard firsthand accounts from those who had encountered them. The stories were warnings. Not everyone received the warning in time. In a sealed chamber, a blade set 4,000 years ago does not know that the empire that built it has been dust for 3 millennia. It only knows when someone reaches in. Number 6. Poison Dart Corridor. In 1946, Matthew Sterling's team from the Smithsonian Institution was clearing a previously inaccessible passage at the Olmec site of La Venta in Veracruz, Mexico, when the displacement of a sealed wall panel produced a sound several team members described as a hiss. Field records from the La Venta excavations document an acute, unexplained illness in one team member developing within hours of the incident. He recovered. Not everyone who walks through the wrong corridor does. The pressurized dart corridor works on a principle that ancient Mesoamerican engineers had mastered in other contexts. The sealed chamber as a reservoir. Hollow ceramic or bone tubes, angled into a corridor from within the walls, connect to a compressed air chamber sealed by an organic membrane. When a trigger stone is shifted or a panel displaced, the membrane ruptures, and whatever is loaded into the tubes, darts, powder, particulate toxin, travels down the tube and into the passage. Toxins documented in Mesoamerican ritual contexts include concentrated aconitine, derived from wolfsbane, extracted compounds from Dendrobatidae frog species, and processed mineral substances, all of which produce acute systemic effects at very small doses. Bone tubes recovered from South American burial sites have retained structural integrity for over 1,000 years in the right soil conditions. The organic membrane would degrade. The tube itself, and the poison it contains, may not. The particular horror of this mechanism is its invisibility and its delay. You do not feel a dart in a dark corridor. You do not connect a moment of air disturbance to what happens 12 hours later when your temperature climbs and your breathing becomes difficult, days after you have left the site entirely. How many archaeologists who died of unexplained illness in the weeks following an excavation had actually walked through a corridor that was still armed? Number 5. Flood chamber. On March 3, 1993, a team of Egyptian and German engineers examining the subterranean passages beneath the Pyramid of Hawara at Fayum triggered a mechanism that the ancient builders of the Middle Kingdom had installed approximately 3,800 years earlier. Within 4 minutes, the lower chamber contained 1.4 meters of water. The team got out. The water kept rising. Hawara is not an obscure site. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus, writing around 450 BCE, described the labyrinthine subterranean complex of Hawara as the most impressive structure he had ever encountered, surpassing in his estimation even the pyramids at Giza. He was writing about a building that already had over 1,000 years of history when he saw it. The builders of Hawara were not primitive architects working by instinct. They were hydraulic engineers who understood the Fayum Depression's exceptional water table, one of the highest in Egypt, and they used it as infrastructure. Concealed channels cut through the bedrock connected the internal chamber system to an external water source. A trigger stone displaced, a weighted plug shifted, a sluice gate opened, and the reservoir the Fayum had been filling for centuries was suddenly, catastrophically, in the room with you. The hydraulics are elegant and devastating. A chamber 4 meters by 4 meters, fed by a pressurized sluice from a reservoir at the Fayum water table depth, fills at a rate that gives an adult human very little time to identify the exit, move toward it, and clear the rising water before the passage constricts. The ancient builders had calculated this. They had time to run those numbers. The water that nearly drowned a team of engineers in 1993 came from the same source the builders of Hawara connected to this trap 4,000 years ago. The engineering still works perfectly. Number 4. Stone Crusher. In 1964, during the clearance of a blocked passage in the Valley of the Kings, a suspended ceiling block of dressed Theban limestone dropped without warning. The lead excavator moved in time. The member of the survey team directly behind him did not. The incident is recorded in Egyptian Antiquities Organization archives. The block weighed 3.2 tons. The stone crusher is not a simple rockfall. It is a designed system, and the design is patient in a way that should disturb anyone who thinks about it carefully. The block is suspended at installation by wooden pins, organic rope, or a precise balance arrangement. These components are not meant to last forever. They are meant to last long enough. Over decades, then centuries, the organic elements degrade gradually, the block shifting fractionally against its housing, becoming more sensitive to vibration with each passing year. By the time a modern excavation team enters the passage, the original trigger mechanism may have been replaced by something far more sensitive. The accumulated fragility of 3,000 years. A footstep, a voice, the vibration of a generator running outside. That can be enough. A 3.2-ton block of stone falling 2 meters generates approximately 88,000 joules of kinetic energy. To put that in a frame of reference that means something physically, that is the equivalent of 30 high-powered rifle rounds striking simultaneously. The portcullis systems of the Pyramid of Khufu, the stonefall arrangements documented at the pyramids of Meidum and Lahun, all represent variations on this same principle. The same engineering logic applied at different scales. The trap does not become less dangerous as it ages. In documented cases, the stone crusher becomes more dangerous with every decade that passes, its trigger threshold lowering imperceptibly, its patience outlasting everyone who built it. In passages where the organic trigger components have had 4,000 years to weaken, what level of disturbance is required now to bring the ceiling down? Number 3. Deadly Ceiling. In 2008, a 4-person conservation team working inside a New Kingdom burial chamber at the Valley of the Queens noticed something that should not have been possible. The ceiling above them had moved, not collapsed, not cracked, moved measurably 4 centimeters downward in the 20 minutes since they had entered the chamber. They evacuated. The ceiling continued moving after they left, dropping a further 22 centimeters before the site was secured. Nobody has gone back in. The deadly ceiling is not a blunt instrument. It is the most psychologically sophisticated trap on this list, and understanding its mechanism requires understanding how the ancient engineers thought about human behavior under pressure. The trap uses a counterweight system based on the same principle as the clepsydra, the ancient water clock, in which a controlled flow of sand or fine gravel through a calibrated aperture governs a descending weight. In this application, the descending weight is the ceiling itself. When the trigger is activated, a reservoir of sand begins draining through a concealed channel. For the first several minutes, nothing visible happens. The ceiling above you appears solid and immovable because it is still supported, but the support is becoming fractionally less reliable with every grain that falls. What the builders understood was how a person responds to a sound behind them in a dark corridor. They move forward, away from the entrance, deeper into the chamber. The ceiling mechanism is designed for exactly that response. It waits for you to clear the threshold, then begins its slow, deliberate descent, giving you time to move inward, away from the exit, before the pace of the drop becomes unmistakable. The 2008 team at the Valley of the Queens understood what they were looking at. They had perhaps 60 seconds between realizing the ceiling was moving and reaching the passage entrance. The ceiling panels in documented New Kingdom examples of this system weigh between 8 and 15 tons across the suspended array. There is no version of this trap, once fully engaged, where a human being can outthink the mathematics. Number 2. Sealed burial chamber. On February 17, 1923, Howard Carter officially opened the innermost burial chamber of Tutankhamun's tomb, designated KV-62, in the Valley of the Kings. Several members of the extended excavation team reported acute headaches and nausea before the chamber was fully breached. Lord Carnarvon, who had funded the entire excavation, died on April 5, 1923, of blood poisoning compounded by a respiratory illness. Within 12 years, at least 11 people with direct connections to the excavation were dead. The world called it a curse. It was not a curse. It was chemistry, and it had been building for 3,000 years. Sealed burial chambers accumulate hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and formaldehyde from decomposing organic burial materials over millennia. Hydrogen sulfide is detectable by the human nose at 0.5 parts per million and becomes lethal above 700 parts per million. A chamber sealed for 3,000 years, lined with organic materials, painted with ancient pigments, and packed with biological matter, can reach concentrations well above that threshold. A 1986 medical analysis published in an Egyptological journal proposed toxic mold spores, specifically Aspergillus niger and Aspergillus flavus, as a contributing mechanism. Both species were subsequently confirmed present in sealed Egyptian tomb environments. Both produce acute pulmonary effects on first exposure. Both had been accumulating in the dark for 30 centuries before Carter's team turned the handle. In June 1994, 3 Egyptian workers required emergency hospitalization for acute respiratory distress after entering a newly breached chamber at Saqqara without respiratory protection. They had been in the chamber for less than 4 minutes. The ancient builders did not need to design a gas trap. They only needed to seal a room and let time fill it with something lethal on their behalf. The most annihilating traps in this list required sophisticated engineering, calculated geometry, and precise mechanical installation. The sealed burial chamber required none of that. It only required patience, and 3,000 years of patience produces something that can still kill a modern human being in under 5 minutes. Number 1. Rolling boulder passage. In April 1987, inside a restricted section of a tomb complex at the Abu Sir necropolis in Egypt, a German archaeological team from the Deutsches Archeologisches Institut activated a mechanism that researchers had theorized about for decades, but had never seen move. The stone they heard had been waiting in its channel for approximately 3,000 years. It weighed 4 tons. The passage was 2 meters wide. There was, the field report notes, nowhere to go. The rolling boulder passage appears in the archaeological record of cultures across the ancient world. William Flinders Petrie, who spent 4 decades excavating Egyptian sites and who documented the mechanism at the Pyramid of Lahan in 1889, wrote in his subsequent field reports that the rolling stone installation there represented the most complete and deliberate example of mechanical security he had encountered in his career. Structural analysis of Mayan pyramid interiors at Uxmal and Chichen Itza has identified channel configurations consistent with rolling stone arrangements. Sima Qian's Shiji explicitly references self-triggering mechanical devices within Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum. This is not a coincidence of design. This is what the most capable engineers of the ancient world converged on when they were asked a single question: how do you guarantee that nothing which enters this passage will ever leave it? The engineering answer is precise and inescapable. A spherical or cylindrical stone, shaped to fit the passage with tolerances of less than 2 centimeters, is mounted in a slightly angled channel with a sloped floor. A wooden pin or balance stone holds it in position, connected to a trip mechanism at the passage entrance. When the pin is dislodged, the stone begins to move. On a 5-degree grade, a 4-ton boulder reaches a terminal velocity of approximately 25 to 30 kilometers per hour within the length of a standard tomb corridor. A human being sprinting at full speed in a confined 2-meter passage cannot exceed 20 kilometers per hour. The math was done in antiquity. The outcome was already settled before the first stone was set. What separates the rolling boulder passage from every other trap on this list is not its lethality. Several mechanisms on this list are equally lethal. What separates it is the evidence of thought. The channel is precision cut to prevent the stone from deflecting. The grade is calculated to ensure acceleration rather than deceleration. The width is specified to eliminate the option of pressing yourself against the wall. The trigger is positioned at the point of deepest commitment, when you are furthest from the entrance and most certain you are safe. Every variable that a desperate human being might exploit in the final seconds has been identified by the builders and closed off. They did not build this trap in anger. They built it in cold, deliberate, unhurried intelligence. And when Flinders Petrie stood in that passage in 1889 and called it the finest piece of mechanical engineering he had ever encountered, he was paying a compliment to people who had been dead for 3,000 years and had still managed to think further ahead than he could. The ancient engineers who built the rolling boulder passage were not trying to frighten anyone. They were solving a problem. The problem was how to make a space permanently, irrevocably lethal to any human being who entered it. They solved it. And the solution they arrived at thousands of years ago, in stone, in geometry, and in a precise understanding of what a frightened person will do in the dark, has never been improved upon. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.